Hey there, Wendy here with Jazzydoodledesigns, and I recently put out the Cute Mice Dining color along, and it was brought to my attention that the segment where I color the mice, the chairs, the table, and the little waiter here, all of this is missing. So I went back to my footage, and indeed, it's just missing. So I guess I thought I was recording when I wasn't. So I apologize. Now the best I could do is take the picture. I took a picture of the before, but when I print it, it prints it kind of gray. And I've tried everything that I can to remove it. I've tried printing it in grayscale. I have tried removing the background, and nothing really works. So we're just going to have to go with this, but I'm going to try and recreate the footage that I'm missing. So I apologize to you guys profusely. I don't try and be an idiot. It just happens. So I'm doing my best from memory and just my knowledge of these colors to recreate it, but I'm kind of intuitive with how I color, so I don't always color the same way. So gonna do my best for you guys. Once again, I apologize. So let's go. Okay, so first we're gonna base our mouse with this peach beige. This is just to give it a little bit of a honey golden color underneath. Now all of the motions that I'm doing, even though I'm basing this, are little flicks like you would do for hair. Just little short flicks of the pencil where you kind of push down, and then as you flick up, you kind of lighten the pressure. And I'm just doing this over the entire little mouse. I'm not trying to cover every square inch of him. I'm also leaving white around his little muzzle or his nose, however you want to say it. But this will kind of lay the foundation for the fur look. Now, I am nowhere near good at making fur. But what I will say is you want to keep your strokes in the direction that the fur lies, but every once in a while you want those strokes to be slightly off. What you want to avoid is creating a uniform pattern of strokes. So oftentimes you'll see me, I'll kind of work on one area and then switch to another area. And by doing that, I'm forcing myself not to make little rows of hair, because we don't want him to look like he has rows of hair. We just want random flicks. But you don't want flicks that are going, perpendicular to the way the fur would lie. So even when I am kind of going off just ever so slightly, it's still in the direction, but maybe just slightly off. I hope that makes sense. Now I decide to do my eye right now because I find that it just helps center me. When the eyeball's not in there, it doesn't look like a mouse. And so, I don't know, I just find it a little disturbing. But I'm vacillating between that warm honey color and the raw umber, and then I want to put some gray in here. And this kind of tones that brown down a little bit. Now, one thing that you're going to notice if you're looking at my finished product versus this one, there are going to be differences. First of all, this paper is more gray tone. That will change it slightly. But also, this is basically printer paper. I chose to use printer paper instead of I like vellum Bristol. Like if I was to print this and create the entire image, I would use a vellum Bristol because I like the toothier paper. But the paper in the Kanoko Agusa books is smooth. And so I felt that this would give us a little closer rendition to what I had than if I used the vellum Bristol, because that Bristol will, more pigment will lay down because it is a little toothier, so it's going to grab that pencil a little bit more. So that's why I chose to just use just basic copy paper. But if you're looking, you may not think that these are the exact colors, or it looks slightly off. Now don't be afraid to erase. You saw I erased. I wanted a little more white around his nose because that's what I did in the original. And so I just went in and erased it. And then I chose the Deco Peach for the little ear insides. Now in this picture I use a lot of French grays. I personally really love the French grays in Prismacolor. It's one of the reasons Prisma's color palette is the main reason that I use Prismacolor. I can use any set of pencils, but to me, I just love these colors. This kind of gray brown just appeals to me. But it's also a unifying factor in our picture because I do use them a lot. But I use the different ones. So like here, I'm using the darker grays. So the lightest gray was what, a 50% for the jacket, and then I'm going to go in with 70 and 90, whereas the little mouse girl on the right, I'm going to be using French grays, but I'm going to start with the 10%, and my darkest, I believe, is a 30%. So even though I'm using French gray on both, it unifies because it's the same color family, but I'm using the different tones to make the picture visually interesting and not all one color. Or hue, or whatever you want to say. But I'm going in with my darker shades, just where the fabric kind of bunches up and there would be shadows along the creases there. I'm just trying to depict a little bit of movement in his jacket. So I want to leave some lighter spots. Now, I believe in the end, when I'm all done, I'm gonna go over the entire thing in this 50%. But at this point, you can see I left those whiter areas. Now I'm going in with my darkest shade here. And this is, I'm going to put only in the deepest shadowy areas. So not the entire crease, but just the deepest part of the crease. This will also help distinguish his pants from the jacket by using these darker tones. And I'm not pushing too hard. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is burnishing and 1 is kissing the paper, we're probably at like a 3 here. So it's still a pretty light touch. One of the things that I've found, because y'all know I'm heavy-handed, is if you notice my pencils, I've begun to sharpen them, even with Prismacolor, to that wicked sharp point. And I found that by doing that, it forces me to color a little lighter, or I just break the lead. So because I'm conscious of that, it's made it a little easier for me to work a little lighter. So you may want to try that. Now don't get me wrong, I still break a pencil here and there, so there's going to be some carnage in our in our learning curve, but I feel like it's worth it because it's really brought my focus to not pressing so hard. So here I'm taking the lavender. If you remember the turnip up there, I used lavender on the turnip. This is also going to be the color I'm going to use on the Mrs. dress. And then the lighter French gray as well. But I just wanted to bring a little bit of that color into him as well. Now taking that French gray, we're going to go over our collar and our little shirt sleeves there. And then once again, bringing in a darker tone just into the little creases. And I didn't think that was quite dark enough, so I went to the 50% there. And then I think I'm going to come back to that jacket. I know I do. But I go ahead and start with our chair. Just laying in our color a little bit there. Now, I wanted these chairs to be just the hint of the color because that guy's whole jacket is essentially the same color of brown. But I really didn't want to introduce another brown. So what I did was I went in with my lighter tones and I just put the impression of color on these chairs. Now, you might not like the look of that, and that's fine. I think I go back to the chairs too and kind of smooth everything out. I really wasn't planning on doing this today, so I'm kind of like, oh gosh, I hope I can duplicate it for them. Now, this is the same color that I'm essentially going to use in the window above. Now, we used pan pastels to get our base layer, but I will use this same powder blue to bring in a little bit of that color into the sky later on in the coloring. So that's why I chose this color for the tablecloth, because I always try and have more than one source of a color. Now I just stepped up to the next blue. I guess technically the next blue was a slate blue, but I wanted it a little more vibrant than slate blue, and so I go in and put this in there. Now, one thing I don't think I show here that I think I did on the other one is I do take a French gray or a sepia, maybe, might be sepia, and I just kind of go into the little crevices of the tablecloth. So take a peek at the picture. I think you'll see where I did that. It's basically wherever there's a curve. And then, yeah, I went over that chair. And here, I guess I used 30%. So I'm going over the entire little jacket just to blend it all out. And just make it look a little smoother. And then, because the pants are darker, I'm using the 50% gray. And here I'm just kind of smoothing and blending where I have some colored pencil strokes and whatnot. Now, I'm not trying to color that entire little section. In fact, you could use sand as another color there instead of cream. But I just want to give a hint of color there. Now, I color the entire menu black, but I'm going to go much darker on that back side. Now, on that back side, you could do something different if you wanted. You could do something like, you could make it a paper color, so like a sand or a French gray or something like that. A beige, maybe, to indicate paper. And that probably would have made more sense, and it probably would have made more sense to have the outside of the menu darker than the inside. But this is just the way I did it. That's the great thing about the kind of coloring that I do, is that I'm not going for hyper realism. I'm not trying to trick anybody. Nobody's going to look at these and be like, is that a photograph? Nope, nobody's going to do that. Now, the other thing that I will tell you is that while I'm reproducing this for you, I'm not maybe blending that out as well as I would if this was, like in the book, like I did the first time, right? So keep that in mind. Now I'm coming in with my darkest tone that I'm going to be using for this little mouse. Just putting this 50% just in little areas where the darker tones would be. Sorry, I kind of got the hiccups. Kind of up closer to her, where her clothing touches and stuff like that. But I really want her to be pretty light. Now here I mess up. See, I say that I'm using 10% gray. I actually color this entire thing with 30% warm gray. And I'm like, why is she so dark? And then I'm like, oh, because, I don't try and be an idiot. It just happens. And then I realize, so I erase the entire thing. So skip that step. Now I'm going in with 10% French gray. Now at this point, you could do the little strokes like we did for the Mr. Mouse, but I just randomly colored in there. I wasn't trying to color the entire thing, but I wasn't being particularly careful like I was with him, just because 10% French gray is so light, you won't notice it. So instead, I just make my strokes random, and I make them in the direction of the hair. Now, when I go in for the 30%, I'm definitely being more conscious of making actual strokes. Now, I decided that I know her little bow was done in the same French grays, so while I had them out, I was just going to go ahead and do it. Now, you could add a little bit of cream to her. I don't believe that I did in the first one, but basically I just wanted all three of them to be similar, but a little bit different tones. You'll notice that the waiter's a little more gray tones, the mister is a little browner tones, and she's a little lighter. And then I just put little pops of the 50% gray in her. And then once again, I really like doing the eyes because then they become more of a mouse to me. It brings them to life. And then I move on to the chair. I'm not quite done with her yet either. I'll go back in and add, I should have done it when I did the ears, make her nose a little bit pink. But if you've watched a color along with me before, you'll know I usually miss some little thing like that and gotta go back in and catch it. But here I'm doing the same thing that I did on the other side. I've got that 10% gray, and then I'm just giving the illusion of color with just little marks. And then just kind of, once again, running all my strokes in the direction of the wood gray. Wood grain, not wood gray. Okay, now we're back. I was like, what am I doing? You're probably wondering that many, many times in the video. But I'm just smoothing out some of that 50%, kind of blending it a little bit so I don't have as stark a contrast. So sorry. Here I do her little nose, and then using white, I go ahead and do her little muzzle around her ears, and just little pops of color here and there. You can do that as much or as little as you want. Now don't forget the little piece at the base of her sleeve. I think I forget it. But we're doing the same thing that we did on the other side. You just want to add a little visual interest where the color is a little different. Now lavender is going to be the lightest shade that we use here in her dress. So I kind of go over areas. I'm leaving my lightest areas a little bit lighter. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I'm going to cover the entire thing. It looks like I am. Cover the entire thing with lavender. And then I'm going to go in with my Dahlia Purple and add my deeper tones into the shadows, much like we did with his clothing. But I am using a very light hand. And now here I'm going in anywhere that there's like a curve in the clothing, or where it bunches together, like it's sewn together there. You want to use this darker tone to kind of indicate areas where the light wouldn't hit as much. Anytime you see the fabric like that, you can use little triangular shapes like this to kind of indicate, where the little valleys of her dress are. And once again, where it kind of attaches and goes underneath her belt or along her collar, etc. But once again, being kind of light, we can go in and do multiple layers, and that's where you get the best benefit. So here, you'll notice, see, I don't cover every, I leave some lighter areas. But I'm kind of blending out those darker tones. Just going along the side of it. Just kind of blending it all out a little bit. Now coming in again and going over it in another layer, adding a little more pressure. So maybe this is more like a 5 or a 6. Adding in with the exact same color, this lavender, and then lightening up when I went over that those lighter spots. And by doing that, by leaving those lighter spots, when I went over it with the third layer, it's almost as if the lighter spots only got 2 layers. And so it naturally looks a little bit lighter, but we're using the same color to do so. Same here with this, with the Dahlia Purple. When I go over those deep creases, I am going in a little heavier handed, but then bringing little strokes up, blending a little more to the side, just kind of smoothing out the really stark differences. And then once again, blending it all out with the lavender. Taking care not to go too heavily on those lighter areas, but we do want to blend them out to where they don't look uncolored. So it's kind of like a little dance. Now for our third little mouse, I'm going in with the French gray, more just like I did for her as our base layer. But with him, I'm going to be adding more warm grays along with our French grays. Now here I'm doing those little hair flick motions, mainly on the side of his face. You can see I'm kind of avoiding that little bridge of his nose area. And then once again, just little pops of color. I'm not trying to color the entire mouse all at one fell swoop. Now, once again, I want his little nose to also have some white. So I'm going ahead and laying that in so that I don't lose it. And you can see it's subtle, but you can see the white, especially on this grayer paper. You may not see it as much when you're doing yours. Now I just want the very underside of his nose to have that black. And I'm going to go ahead and do his little eyes. Now doing his mouth, and then starting from his whisker area, I'm just doing those little flicking motions. This is warm gray. This is not French gray. So, apologies. Y'all must think I'm an idiot. It's harder than you think, though, guys, to pay attention to all of that. I think it depends. There are some pictures that I color that I feel like it's a lot more apparent. Some pictures are just, they're a little more, this is a little more of a layering technique. Whereas if you blend, you know, okay, I want these three colors and I'm gonna blend. But when you're doing more layering techniques like this one, it's a little harder to keep track of all your pencils and stuff. So once again, going in with your darker tones just in the areas and little areas around the ears where they attach to the head, the ears where the hair's coming out and it's a little deeper set, and then just random flicks there in the middle just so that it kind of blends in together. Same with on his arm. You want your deeper tones on the outside, but you do want some flicks there on the inside. Now I chose to color his shirt white and up along his little face. There I go, dealing the cards at Vegas again. Okay, so his little jacket. Now, you could go in with like a Payne's gray and put the first layer down and then darken the area. When I go in for my second layer of black, I want to make sure that I leave just ever so slightly an edge at the edge of his vest, And at the edge of where the vest meets in the middle on both sides, just a little, you see I leave a little ridge of not putting 2 layers, just only putting 1. Visually, I like the look of that. Now, if you want it to look more polished, take a lighter gray and run that along there. I'm okay with the way it turns out in the original. I'm a little more impatient on this one. So now I'm doing an entire layer of red over the bow tie. And then I'm going to go in with my darker tone into the, where the bow is meeting the knot and where on the outside of the bow. Now, you could use a much lighter red. You could start with like a poppy red or a crimson red. But because I didn't, I chose to grab some sepia and use that to help me. Oh, you know what I think I used in the original was Tuscan red. So don't use sepia here, maybe use Tuscan red. Sepia is fine too, but I think Tuscan red is nicer. It just adds a little bit nicer blend. But when I was coloring it just now, I didn't think about that. But that's essentially how you get those darker areas there. Now I'm going to do the towel in the French grays just because, once again, I don't want to introduce another color. I thought about making it red. It just felt like it'd be a little too much. So I wanted it to blend a little bit. I don't want the towel to be a focal point. Same with the table. By using the same colors that we use throughout the entire picture, like for the table and stuff, what it does is it allows the table to just blend in and not be a focal point, because we want our attention drawn to the mouse. So the red on the bow tie draws the attention. The lavender draws the attention. Our fruits and vegetables have some colors, so those are the things that we want to highlight in our drawing, right? Or in this coloring. So this is pretty much the end. I'm going to go ahead and blend this out. I'm just using a combination of 50, 30, and 10% French grays, and adding the darker tones in where there would be shadows or recesses, and the lighter tones to blend it out. I apologize for not recording this, but I hope that you found this helpful. And once again, thank you so much for being the best community on YouTube. You guys are so kind and so understanding. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you for watching another video from Jazzydoodledesigns. If you enjoy adult coloring content, please consider subscribing. You can now find me on Instagram and Facebook as well. I welcome all comments and suggestions. Don't forget to like the video before you go. And until next time, take care.